All right, everybody, welcome back to the Outdoor Drive Podcast. This is episode 224. This is your boy East Coast Trev, and I'm joined with my good buddy Mr. Madman Mardick.
I'm not even mad. Why do you keep calling me that?
The Madman. What up, Madman?
What up, brother?
Hey, so I know that this podcast, guys, is a little bit special. We had some really good guests on, some friends of mine locally, here in Connecticut. Mike is somebody that I honestly is a great role model. Somebody that is a great storyteller. Somebody that I met not all that long ago, but I've spent a lot of time talking to him on the dock and always wanted him to have him on the podcast, right? And Mike is one of those just amazing storytellers, very humble guy, kind of been there, done that, seen it, done it kind of guy, but doesn't really talk about it, And I'll give you a little background. Obviously, invited me up to his house one day. I used to trade him some racks from the charter boat for lobster bait. He's a lobsterman, scallopman here. Very very looked up to guy. Him and his cousin Brad ended up joining us. I got to go to his house and see some of his trophies, and Mike's an incredible outdoorsman, and so is Brad. And we were blessed to have him on the podcast, and always wanted to have him on the podcast, but never knew the right situation to have him on. And this is the right situation. He
Mhm.
endured him and Brad endured some crazy stuff, and something that not everybody would come forth and talk about, but something that everybody needs to know. And Mike had reached out to me and wanted to share the message, and a message that we are vulnerable in the situation that we put ourselves in every single year and going and traveling on hunts. So that's what this podcast is about, and I hope that everybody can kind of take a little bit from it and maybe be a little bit more aware of their surroundings and kind of think a little bit more, because I think it's kind of important. And I hope that, maybe one day if somebody's ever put in this situation that they could, just look back and kind of think about this situation, and hopefully it'll change the outcome of the situation that you're putting yourself into. So listen up here. We're going to get right into it. We're going to kind of skip the intro, something that we normally don't do, but we're going to thank our sponsors, and then we'll kind of get the boys on. What do you think, Madman?
I like it.
All right. First off, we are title sponsored by Huntworth Gear. They are probably, they are the home of the Heat Boost. And
Mm.
Heat Boost is probably one of the most incredible things when it comes to camouflage. It is actually a graphite woven
Rafi.
graphene. I always lose that. Woven material, also anti-wicking, and I mean, it's wicking and also
Comfortable.
anti-outer. Yeah, it's some of the
I
greatest
need
stuff ever.
I need Huntworth to come out with some Huntworth sweatpants.
Yeah,
I had some Huntworth sweatpants. I would just live in Huntworth for the entire month of November.
dude, I wear my Durham pants, my brown ones, all the time. I'm like wearing them out. Honestly, I wear them
And
every
what
time that they're
tour?
washed. What? Come on
Wear
now.
the dermis to work.
Yeah, I wear them anywhere I can. Well, those are camouflage ones because I fell in the swamp, but whatever. So you guys go and check them out, huntworthgear.com. Get everything that you possibly could need. There's always great sales, so always pay attention to them, huntworthgear.com. Also, Latitude Outdoors, latitudeoutdoors.com. You guys that are thinking about getting into the mobile world and saddle hunting, there is the Carbon SS sticks, which is a great game changer when it comes to mobile hunting. Everybody that's used them absolutely loves them. We've hunted with them for the entire season. The packability and the usability is probably far none, probably some of the best climbing sticks that there is in the market. Make sure to check those guys out, and the promo code Outdoor Drive for that one. Save yourself a couple of bucks there. Nor'easter Game Calls, nor'eastergamecalls.com. Some of the greatest stuff. I know I keep saying it, but we believe in our sponsors. We just don't do it to do it. Like, they are family to us. So Mark is, I call him my adopted father. I adopted him. So incredible stuff over there as the seasons start to progressively go on. Coyote season's coming into effect. Think about that. Turkey season's right around the corner. There's actually a new owl call that is in the works and in the makes and will be here for the spring. I can promise you that. All of our turkey calls, the mouth calls, the pot calls, you name it, we got it. So get on over to nor'eastergamecalls.com. And last but not least, Bowhunters United, bowhuntersunited.com. Also the home of the ATA. So that's where they come from. Make sure to get on their website. It's a free membership and sign up for their newsletter to stay up to date for all of your bow hunting needs. So bowhuntersunited.com. Mardik, without further ado, buddy, unless you
I want
got
to throw
something
one thing. I
crazy.
got one thing real
See, you
quick
always
because
got one
I
thing.
didn't talk in
I
this
know.
episode. I just sat there and I kicked back and just
All
soaked it all
right.
in.
All right.
And
Let
there's
it have
one
it.
thing I want to say:
What's that?
trust in your gut, because it's the only thing that it never really came out in the episode, and that goes for when you're in the field. You got that feeling. Maybe the deer's over here, or maybe I should sit this tree. You should always trust your gut, and that also applies to life itself. You get that feeling, you should trust your gut. And I think this story, as the listeners will listen to it, you will see multiple times throughout this podcast where Mike and Brad trusted their gut, and thank God that they did.
Without further ado, let's get on into the episode.
The Outdoor Drive Podcast.
All right, guys, we are back on the phone with Mike and Brad, who actually are cousins. You guys have not heard their voice yet on the podcast, but the message of this podcast is pretty cool. How you guys doing, Mike and Brad? How's everybody?
We're doing great, guys. Happy to be here.
Excellent.
We appreciate you guys jumping on, man. Without further ado, let's put this thing right in four-wheel drive. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you guys do?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I guess I'll go first. My name is Mike Theiler. I'm from Waterford, Connecticut, I'm a commercial fisherman, but I've always had a passion for the outdoors and spend a lot of my waking hours. If I'm not hunting, I'm thinking about hunting. Uh, been all over the world and quite a number of adventures. And Brad and myself, we're cousins, as Trevor said, and we grew up together. So we've been able to share a few adventures together and hope to be on a few more.
Yeah, I'm Brad Bishop from northern Wisconsin, and I'm a real estate investor. I used to be a carpenter for 25 years and decided I had to up my game a little bit. But like Michael, my passion for hunting it drives everything. Trying to give yourself more time out in the woods all the time. And lately, it's been more out of state than in state, which is really what I enjoy. Jumping around. I'm mostly a bow hunter.
So where did the whole passion for you guys start? I mean, you guys are a little bit older than we are, and guys have probably seen a lot more states and done a lot more hunting than we have. But where did it all kind of start and instill in you guys?
Probably for myself, it was, from my dad. My dad was from northern Wisconsin and a school teacher. So the summers, we would spend the summers out at some family property out in Wisconsin, right near where Brad lives. And you know, more than hunting, he instilled the love for the outdoors. So anything outdoors. And my real passion used to be fishing, but when I when it became a vocation, when it became my occupation, then all of a sudden, I looked for something else to to share that same experience and to kind of be able to decompress a little, and I found it in the woods rather than originally where it was in the water. But like I said, I also share the same love for traveling and going places and meeting people and seeing different things. So yeah.
I would say mine started, believe it or not, with my barber. back when I don't even remember how old, 9 maybe. And my barber was an avid bow hunter. And he sold me my first bow. I had to, cry and beg and kick for my dad to buy me this bow. And it was an American Archer Bobcat. I still have it. And I started practicing in the backyard, put an arrow through the middle of an apple tree, just I had arrows going every which way. And that kind of started it. And then I got away from it a little bit, but then I got back into it with just a driving passion. And it's my dad. My dad got me started a little bit, I would say. He took me out. He wasn't a big hunter by any means, but he'd take me out and put me out in the woods, and I would freeze to death. I almost to the point where you didn't enjoy it. Your feet, you didn't have the adequate footwear, you didn't have gloves, you didn't have the hand warmers and stuff you have today. But I still persevered, and you learn all that stuff as you go, and now it's quite a bit more enjoyable.
So what made it so that you two guys were actually hunting together? Because I mean, there's a big separation between the two of you as far as living. Mike being in Connecticut and you being in Wisconsin. Like, what made you guys start to hunt together, or when was the first time that you did hunt together?
I think we used to talk on the phone quite a bit, and I wasn't into bow hunting like Brad was, but just listened to him, and I was always Brad probably doesn't know this, but I was always very envious of you when you would be able to take off and go trapping across the western states there, and I thought, man, that's really what I want to do. I want to go trapping out west, bobcats and um, so that's really, was my probably the focus of my bow hunting was playing catch up to what you've done, Brad.
Well, I'd say you caught up and surpassed it by all the adventures you've been on.
So
Now,
we started putting we put in for tags, in other states and stuff, and started to draw a few. We were lucky enough to draw a tag in New Hampshire for moose. Um, we got a bull. It wasn't exactly the way we had mapped it out, but we did get a bull, a real nice bull. Um, we've turkey hunted together, and then shared some experiences in other states, Missouri, bow hunting there, and got some mutual friends out in Iowa and such. So,
so
um,
So how do you, with you guys being separated like that, and I know like we have a lot of listeners that like to travel hunt or whatever, but like how do you go about like the scouting aspect, and especially not being very close together?
yeah, well, on this particular hunt, this was an elk hunt in New Mexico, and I had done some guiding in a neighboring unit back in. I think I shot bulls in 2013 and 14 in a neighboring unit, so I kind of knew a little bit about what to expect. But for the most part, on this particular hunt, it was we're going to get there 4 or 5 days early and put some boots on the ground and find some elk. And we were very fortunate that that's actually exactly how it played out. I mean, we were as far as elk hunting goes, we definitely. I mean, I booked this cabin on the Airbnb, and I just wanted to be away from the crowds. I knew where the crowds were going to be, and we just kind of went in the opposite direction.
Well, all right, we went right into it. So why don't we just dive right in and let's talk about this specific hunt that you guys going on and kind of the reason why we had you here. So why don't you talk about this specific hunt because it's kind of cool, and I know that excuse me, me and Mike had actually talked about it. Excuse me. Wow.
You all right?
Wow.
I'll take over, Travis. Don't worry about it.
No, me and you, Mike, actually talked about it, and we were wondering about, you were asking about the unit and whatever, if we had some friends in the unit and stuff. So obviously you were doing some background hunt, but it was cool that you were doing the muzzleloader. So why don't you dive into it and kind of tell everybody a little bit about it?
Yeah. So initially, in all honesty, it wasn't supposed to be Brad and myself. So I have another friend of mine that's a lobsterman up on the Cape, and we've hunted probably 6 of the last 7 years together. And we've been putting in for tags in New Mexico, maybe 6 or 7 years. and I haven't drawn since 2014, but we put a party application in every year. And sometimes it's the two of us, sometimes it's along with my wife who wants as well. And so we, with the fishing and trying to coordinate, it's usually 4:30 in the morning on the day that the hunt is, the application is you have to put the application in by. So we put the application in, and then later on that day, I thought to myself, well, you know what, I'm gonna put in for one of the sheep units as well. So I went in and amended my application, and what I didn't do was I forgot to add the group. You have to have a group number that you add at the end as a party leader, and then you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I forgot to put the group number in. So come, I don't know, it was April, maybe March, I get an email, you're successful. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So I call, Bo up and I'm like, listen, we just drew. It's great units. He's like, I didn't draw. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't draw? He's like, I didn't draw. I'm like, well, there must be some kind of computer problem. So I called the, Fish and Game, and finally someone says, no, you guys weren't on the same party application. I'm like, how can that be? And they're like, well, you went back in about 7 o'clock in the morning and changed your application. Now, he's never elk hunted before. That's like his dream hunt. I told him, listen, if we both draw, I don't care if I shoot one or not. I just want to be part of the hunt. I can, I know have enough knowledge that I can probably find a few elk. So as it turned out, he didn't end up going. And as you know, Trevor, I was trying to find someone to go and trying to find as much information as possible. And my wife was going to go. And actually, Brad and I spoke about bringing both of our wives. And most of the hunting's done in the morning or in the evening, and it's just nice being out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this town that we went to, the name of the town is Weed, New Mexico. The population is 63. So, you know, it was a cabin we rented on the edge of this big ranch, and it went right into Forest Service property, so we could literally just walk out the door and start hunting. You know, um, it didn't. We ended up scouting some more areas other than just the ranch and just the Forest Service behind it, but pretty much we were right in the thick of things. But I had asked Brad early on, when Bo said he wasn't going to go if he didn't have a tag. And I think we probably hashed it over a few times, Brad. I think we talked on the phone a couple times. And when you finally said that you were going to go, I was just absolutely thrilled. Brad is probably one of the best woodsmen, probably the best woodsman that I know. And I don't mean just hunting, just everything to do with the hunt. So I was just thrilled to have him with me. And I knew that one way or another, that this trip would end up being successful.
And so obviously you guys got there a couple days early and started scouting and kind of, go right into it and how guys, as you guys traveled out there and kind of the steps and procedures you guys went through.
So I left Connecticut like 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday the 8th, and the season didn't start till the following Saturday. So I drove out to Iowa, and Brad's wife Sandy brought him down to Iowa. We met there, slept for a couple hours, and then headed basically southwest towards New Mexico. I think we stopped maybe in Texas or Oklahoma for a few hours, like 3 o'clock in the morning. But for the most part, we kind of got on it and got down there, and by I think it was midday Tuesday, we were there at the cabin, and but it was kind of a funky setup, like like the lady that owned the cabin, great, real nice woman. Like she didn't even want to give me the code to the door because no one locks the door. You don't need the code to the door. I just leave the door open all the time. And I'm like, I'm from the East Coast. Maybe you better give me that code. So when we got there, the door was wide open.
Just being unsure.
The door was wide open, right? But it was a very comfortable camp, right, Brad? I mean, it was great. It was
beautiful. Right
on the edge of a pasture. And actually, one night, Brad saw a monster bull in the pasture, right in front of the cabin there with some cows. But it was a great spot, and we got there. We kind of settled in. And but both of us were pretty shot just from traveling, right? I've been in the car for 2 days, basically in the truck, and I've got a big Dodge pickup truck with a blue fish box, like a blue vat that we put tuna fish in, and I have a silver pickup truck with a blue vat in the back. I put a ton of ice in, and 3/4 of a ton of ice in there, and believe it or not, I still had ice in that vat 2 weeks later after I'd been home for a week and a half. But so we pull up to the camp, we get settled in, and go out scouting, and wouldn't you know, son of a gun, that first night we saw some bulls. You know, I don't
Mhm.
remember how many we saw, but I mean, they were definitely had some bone on them. They're bulls and cows, I think, Brad.
Yeah.
You know, so we knew right then that we were kind of in, we were kind of in elk country, and we were in the right spot. So we made some dinner and kind of got our things set and went to bed. And then I had the room in the front towards the porch, and 1:15 in the morning, bam, 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 someone's banging on the front door, and I thought to myself, well, I'm just hearing things, and then they started banging again. I got up and answered the door. I mean, there's no cell service out there. You got to remember, there's no cell service. There's really like there was no traffic on. There was a dirt road with the cabin was on. There's no traffic there or anything. I mean, there was the rancher's and his sister's house, I think, on that, maybe 3 houses on that road. But then you
Yeah.
could go an awful long ways in the other direction till there was no houses. It wasn't like where we live or anything. Pretty. Once we left Cloudcroft, I think there wasn't really too much, right? We got fuel in Cloudcroft, which was maybe 40 or 50 miles away, I think. Does that sound about right, Brad?
Yeah. You keep going down the road we were on, you run into Mexico.
Yeah. So there wasn't really much there, and and so this guy's banging on the door, and I didn't know if it was the landowner. I didn't know. I'm not too much of an internet guy, so I'm thinking, well, Jesus, maybe we're in the wrong cabin. I mean, who knows, right? So I answer the door, and here's this guy, and he's got his sweatshirt all pulled over his hood like a bonnet. And I said, I didn't really open the door much. I'm like, can I help you? And he pulls his sweatshirt back, and he says, yeah, my truck's broke down. He says, I think I'm out of gas. So I said, well, I got a gas can in the back of my truck. Just take it. You can have it. He's like, I'm in a bad spot. The truck's right in the middle of the road, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll get dressed, and I'll give you a hand. I mean, what are you going to say? No, you know what I'm saying? You're in the middle of nowhere, right? If I was broke down, where the hell are you going to go? So that's kind of where things started getting kooky. I got Brad up, and I told him that someone was at the door, and I'm not going to say we were armed, and I'm not going to say we weren't armed, because maybe you need a permit in some of these states that maybe you wouldn't have if you lived on the East Coast. But I did tell Brad to sit in the back seat. I've seen enough Godfather movies and Brad agreed, you see enough Godfather. Vito's always in the back seat. He's not sitting in front. He's got the piano wire ready to choke someone out. So I sat my cousin Vito, in the back seat, and this guy gets in, and he starts telling us about, his buddy that shot an elk, and how he was, out all day. And I'm thinking, this guy doesn't look like an elk hunter, and he's not covered in blood. If you would spend a day working on an elk, your sleeves would be all bloody. You know what I'm saying? It just things didn't seem to add up. So we drive the guy out, and we get to his truck, and it wasn't in the middle of the road like he said. And the other thing was, the first thing both of us noticed is he's got no license plate on the back. So when we were talking about the elk hunting, both Brad and I know a little bit about seasons and legality. And I said to him, oh, what'd you shoot it with? He says, oh, I shot it with a rifle, or my buddy shot it. I think he said his buddy shot it with a rifle, right, Brad?
That's
Buddy
correct.
shot it with, yeah, a rifle. And I'm thinking, well, we just got done with bow season. Late, there was early bow season, then second season, then there was like 4 or 5 day break. You had a youth hunt in there somewhere, but then you went right into muzzleloader season, and then you went to rifle season. So this idea that he shot this with a rifle all of a sudden isn't really setting very well with Brad and I. But we don't want to put the guy in. We're not going to try to force the guy into a corner, right? We just want to get him on his way, fill him up with gas, and get him on his way.
And you guys are there muzzleloader hunting as it is, so you already
Yes, it
know.
was muzzleloader season in
Right.
4 days.
Right.
The season wasn't open when we were there. That
Mhm.
I know of. There might have been a mobility impaired 2 day hunt, something like that, but the season wasn't open. It certainly wasn't rifle season. So, so he told us where he had supposedly shot this elk, which was close by, so it was definitely our unit. And when I asked him about the license plate, he says, these bumpy roads, it fell off. I got it here in the back seat. But the whole truck was dirty except for where that license plate was. If he had been going down those bumpy roads, that license plate would have been just covered in mud like the rest of the truck, right?
Mhm.
So by now, both Brad and I are thinking to ourselves, man, something just isn't clicking. But you got to remember that these criminals, right? These people have a way of manipulating you. So we start, we get out of the truck. I give him the gas can, and he starts with, these new gas cans. Geez, you can't hardly, it's so hard. And I know what he's talking about. The new gas cans, you got to stick the nozzle and push it in. And he's like, can you pour this gas for me? And I'm thinking for a minute, I don't think so. I said, I'll hold the flashlight. It's your truck. You pour the gas. Geez, that's a great flashlight you got there. Boy, that thing's really bright. Hey, you mind, while I'm pouring this gas, you mind seeing if anything's leaking out the bottom? I think I got a leak in that tank. And I'm thinking, there's no way in heck I'm crawling under this truck. I said, it's going to be light in a couple hours. You they see all around the truck. So now I'm thinking, man, this guy's really trying to play us a little bit. So he puts the gas in, and I tried to look over his shoulder, like look in the truck a little bit, but he kind of blocked me from looking in the truck. And the real kicker is, I know you're a very upstanding guy, and you, madman, you seem like you are. You probably never ran out of gas in your life, but the rest of us guys, we run chainsaws and friggin' boats and everything else out of gas. And it is I can't even say the word, but it's very difficult to get something started once you're running out of gas.
Mhm.
That guy turned the key. That freaking truck started right up. Right, Brad? That
Absolutely.
freaking truck started right up. And we just looked at each other, and I'm like, all right, there's not a word that came out of this guy's mouth that has any truth of it, to it.
Brad, what are
So
you thinking about in the back seat as you're driving down the road? Because now you guys can't communicate with one another while this is going on. Like, you're.
Yeah, I'm just keeping a close eye on this guy because I don't know what his intentions are. You like to think that everybody has the best intentions, but at the same time, here you are at night going by flashlight, and I just stayed in the truck and I just kept an eye on him, and I wasn't privy to what was going on, what was being said out there,
Mhm.
but yeah, and I noticed the tags right away too. You just pick up on little things, and when things don't add up, it's usually because the truth isn't part of the equation,
Mhm.
and everything that he was saying, like Michael said, it wasn't adding up.
so we get the guy on his way, and Brad and I talked about it in the truck. Like, if this guy comes back to the house, we're all done with him. This is our deed right here. But there's something that's not right. And the guy, this is going to sound really kind of kooky, but he had a very strange odor to him. It wasn't like BO, it wasn't like booze. I don't know if you noticed that, Brad. He just had a very, like, I'm next to the guy, and I'm thinking, man, this is just a very strange foul odor, and I don't really know how to explain it. I don't know if it's a smell of evil or if it was a smell of meth or something but it was just a very, very peculiar odor. And if I ever smelt it again, I think I'd really lose my cookies. So we get back to camp. We both go back to bed, and I didn't
Well,
think
the
anything of
interesting.
it.
Let me just jump in here for a second, Mike, because he drove off ahead of us. and he turned down the road we got to turn down. I'm like, well, where the heck is he going?
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't even realize he was down the same road. That just struck me as odd. But at the same time, we were done with them, and I just let it go.
But the road ended. The road ended maybe a quarter mile past the camp, not much more than a quarter mile. And there was a gate that went into forest. It was a ranch, and then it went to Forest Service property. So there was no place for him to go. It was basically a dead end road. We found out later that he'd been up there for a week or so, a week and a half. And actually, the rancher's wife had seen his truck and wanted to report it to the sheriff's department. But when she walked the dog up there, the dog started growling at the guy's truck, and she got this very strange feeling. We found this afterwards that she got this very strange feeling someone was watching her. So she just slipped her hand inside her purse to her pistol and just kept walking, and then didn't walk back there again, at least till after the whole incident, I guess.
And that's one of the things out there, obviously, like New Mexico and some of these western states, like everybody has a gun. Like everybody carries, like that's a normality of life. Like firearms, everybody carries a firearm. I mean, they're walking their dog and carrying a firearm.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's. I mean, on one hand, they don't lock the doors, but on the other hand, yeah, they. I mean, the rancher was carrying, and his wife, she said that she did, and
Hmm.
yeah, our friend Lance, he carries. I mean, they're not obvious about it, but yeah. Um, so anyhow, so we go back to bed, and then in the morning we get up and we go to a high point and we start glassing again, and once you know, we got some more elk. Did we go down the draw that day, or were we up by the? I don't even remember exactly. I think we went up to the top of the hill there, and where we were the night before.
Yeah, I
And
think so,
anyhow,
because we were there the night before, and we wanted to see what the morning activity was.
yeah, I think we were back in the same spot, and definitely saw elk. So we go back to camp, and Brad's a carnivore, so he's making like 3 dozen eggs for himself and a couple pounds of bacon, and he's he's got the exhaust fan going. So this might be 10 o'clock in the morning, and I hear what sounds like someone talking like on the ring camera or something, like like a radio, and I'm thinking, well, what the heck is that? So I listen and I hear something again, wah, wah, wah. And like I said, the exhaust fan's going, the eggs are crackling, the bacon, and so I walk out in the front porch and I'm greeted with, "Get your hands in the air! Get your hands in the air! Get your hands where I can see them!" And the whole street is lined with sheriffs and state police, and they got the house surrounded. These guys don't have pistols. These guys got rifles pointed at me, and I'm like, it's like time slowed down, right? And all I said was, "You got the wrong guy," and they're like, "Get your hands!" And I'm like, "Yes, sir, yes, sir. My hands are up. I'm walking backwards to your voice. I got a knife in my front pocket, and I'm trying to maintain some kind of respect for them, because the last thing I need to do is get shot by one of these guys that thinks I'm making the wrong move, right?" So I have to say that they were very respectful. They cuffed me, and I wasn't face down in the dirt with some guy's knee in the back of my head. They cuffed me, they frisked me, they emptied my pockets, they put me in the truck, and I tried to maintain some sort of dialogue with them. I'm not going to say they were pleased with us, but they certainly weren't. Um, they certainly weren't abrasive, or it was very to the point. Like, they didn't want to hear nothing I had to say. They want to know who else was in the cabin and how are they going to get them out. And so they cuffed me and stuck me in the back of a sheriff's vehicle. And then, of course, Brad took his time cooking the bacon, making sure it was completely done while I'm sitting back there. And it was quite a while. I'm not going to say it was, I mean, it was like when you're in the back of the police car with these guys all, surround the house, I mean, it had to be 8 minutes or so. I'm trying to think of how long it was. It wasn't like he just walked out. I'm not sure if you had a spatula in your hand or not, but I know when you walked out, you looked about bewildered as I did. I was just afraid that he left the bacon on the stove and the house was going to go up in flames.
Brad's eating the whole breakfast before he decides that he wants to. He's like, "Oh, where's Mike?" Right?
Well, I just, Mike's, he can have a long story with anybody. So I figured if he ran into somebody, because he went out to check what's going on, and I said, well, he must have run into somebody. So I just kept cooking away, and like he said, it was loud. It was really loud. The fan was right by your ear, and pretty soon everything got done. Michael had his things going, so I turned his stuff off, turned my stuff off, and I hear, "Come out with your hands up." And I went, "Ooh, that can't be good." So I go walking out by the door and I peeked my head out and saw the same thing Mike did, all these rifles pointed. And so I put my hands up right away, but then I'm in stocking feet, and it's a rock gravel driveway. So I reached down to get my Crocs. Well, that didn't sit too well with
That
them.
wasn't too good.
And so they freaked out on that a little bit. I'm like, okay, sorry. So I got out on the deck and then I walked back to the truck as well. I didn't know where Mike was. I had no idea. I just was doing, obeying their orders for the time being. And go ahead, Mike. You can take it from there.
So they got us separated, obviously, and the first thing they asked me is, do you have some identification? And I said, yeah, I got it in my wallet, and my name and address, and I'm Mike, I'm from Connecticut and stuff, and so they go through my wallet, grab my license, and the first thing they find is my Florida driver's license. So the guy's like, all right, Buster, what is it? Is it Connecticut? Is it Florida? I'm like, oh man, geez, I got a house in Florida. I'm trying to explain. I said, what's this about anyhow? He goes, we're investigating a homicide. And that's when things got, if the guns weren't enough and all these guys all hopped up and you could see like these guys, their eyes were red and stuff. Like they knew, whoever got shot. So then I'm like, oh man, I mean, if time didn't stand still before, it certainly did now. I'm thinking, oh my God, how did we get, how are we in this position? We're a long ways from home. We're not in Kansas anymore. We're a long ways from home. So they got us together. I got out of the truck there and they started asking us questions. And I'm going to tell both of you guys in the audience as well. It is so difficult, especially when, your adrenaline is running. And they asked us questions like, well, what did the guy look like? I'm like, well, he's middle-aged, balding guy. Well, guess what? I could use a little more grass on the top of my head, too. I might be middle-aged. I could probably fit that. Middle-aged, balding. And I think they asked if he had facial hair. We're trying to figure out whether or not the guy, just trying to recall from the 1 o'clock in the morning. I think I'm not sure if he had a beard and it's very difficult. So you can see how people like, in some kind of crime scene, they want to know how tall the guy was and what size he was. And it is very, it's very difficult to recount all those things, especially under pressure like that. Well, turns out he had a Dodge pickup, just like mine. He had a blue Dodge pickup. I had a silver Dodge with a blue fish box. Middle-aged balding, guess what? So we checked a lot of boxes. What had happened was one of the ranch hands, or maybe the rancher's wife, I think, told them that this guy was living up the trail that we were camped on at the cabin, except he was just a little bit past our cabin. So when they saw us, they stopped, and it really wasn't until I said, "Listen, you got to call the landowner. They have the ring cameras right there. They got to have pictures of this guy." And they got the ring camera pictures that I sent to you, Trevor, and then they they actually told us to wait right here, and then they all went charging up, and we got tired of waiting, so we went back in the cabin, and then they came back. But while they were there, they're on the bullhorn. When the guy went to pull out, his siren went off. The guy, obviously, that was only 300 or 400 yards from us, heard the commotion, and apparently he drove the truck off into the woods. They had brought a dog up later that morning and they actually had a helicopter that evening, I think it was. We went out that afternoon right up behind the camp there, Brad. They had that helicopter going back and forth looking for the guy and the truck and everything. But what was interesting is the last police officer that left the scene there, he said to us, he said, in New Mexico, if you feel your life is threatened, you have the legal right to use lethal force. He said, of course, we'd hope that you'd call the police department first, but there's no cell service out here. And he also reminded us that we helped him the night before or that morning. We'd helped the guy, and if he needed help, there's probably a pretty strong chance that he would come back and look for help again, you know? So I know both of us, for God's sakes, I had the muzzle loader in bed with me. And I'm thinking, if I ever have to shoot this thing in the house, it's so full of smoke, you wouldn't see me anyhow. But yeah, both of us were a little unnerved. They did catch the guy the next day. Um, he had told us that he was going to the ranch next door to get gas in the morning. And we told the detectives that, and one of them had said, "Oh my God, my brother-in-law runs that ranch," and I think he took off. Um, the bottom line is the guy left us that morning, went to the convenience store or the gas station. That's the only gas station like nearby. It was like 15 miles away, and he shot a girl twice with the rifle and killed her, or for like $20 worth of gas. He The girl had a 3-year-old child, and it was her first day on the job. Just I wish I could tell you that this story had a happy ending, but and it is kind of a interesting story. But at the end of the day, the guy that was in the truck with us was cold-blooded killer.
And I
Truck
really
was
think that when he came to our place and then he got us out there by his truck with the gas and everything, I really think he was looking for an angle to get Michael's truck and wallet and everything because he had the firepower. It wouldn't have taken much if he would have been by himself or if he would have seen an opportunity, which we didn't give him.
or if Janet, my wife, was with me in the front seat, or if he'd gone to the cabin the night before and both of our wives had been there, just could have been a
Yeah.
very different story. Yeah.
And it's crazy because like you guys don't know what you're dealing with at the time, but you guys just had enough smarts and to try and keep him at bay. Like you knew that something wasn't right, and the situation could have been totally different. Like if you didn't have the wits about you, like he could have definitely done something, and it could have been a different ending.
Yeah. There's a trust me, and I'm sure both of us have thought about 100 different scenarios. There was a woman with 2 kids that was in the cabin the night before us. She'd been there for a week,
Oh
and
my.
and if he had gone to the cabin to try to steal her car or whatever, he probably could have really easily overpowered her and the kids or whatever. I think he stopped at a couple of houses there. He stopped at the rancher's house, I think, the night before. But the rancher heard the dogs barking, but thought it was a bear or something, so he never even went to the door. Um, the guy shot a couple of the rancher's calves and was eating them while he was there, but never really had a tent or any camping equipment or anything with him. Just very bizarre. The guy's name was Joe Sanders, and you saw from the pictures the guy looks like he's about 70 years old, but in actuality he's only 52. He only lived about 50 miles away, but I have a feeling that that you don't just shoot someone for $20 worth of gas, right? You just run off maybe, and what's the worst thing could happen? They make you pay the $20. I mean, it's not even is that a misdemeanor? I mean, you know what I'm saying? You don't shoot someone unless you're running from something. So he was arrested for first-degree murder and held without bond. He was arrested for theft of a motor vehicle, And then there was one other charge. I don't remember what it was. I haven't really followed up on it, but I do know that he was being held without bond.
Was there something else that he was running from to then do this, or was he just lost his mind, or?
I wish I could tell you. I really don't know. I kind of figured that that he they'd go find his family murdered, something that
Hmm.
I don't know, something that a crime that he committed somewhere else and he was running from the law. Why would you steal someone's truck and then shoot someone and kill them at it, for $20 worth of, what I'm saying? It just, none of it really makes sense.
And then to
And,
potentially do it again. He was trying to do it again with you guys, like more or less, right? I mean,
I think he would have, I think I agree with Brad. He would have taken our money in our truck in a heartbeat if he had the opportunity. And as much as I'd like to think that Brad and I had our wits about us, I'm a God fearing guy, and someone was definitely looking after us. There's no doubt about it. We were put in that position for a reason, and maybe we saved someone else. I wish we could have saved the girl. We had no idea. We did try to call the game warden that morning to say that this guy told us that he shot this elk, but we had no cell service. We had no way of getting a hold of anyone.
He was up that canyon for a reason. He was hiding out, but the problem was with the elk season coming up for muzzleloader, his world was getting really small. And now he's got a gasoline problem and a money problem, and he can't get out of there. But he was definitely hiding from something. We just don't know what it is yet.
that's crazy. And the funny, and not the funny, but the the crazy thing about the whole situation is how many of us as outdoorsmen put ourselves in this predicament year after year after year, time after time after time. I mean, how many times have, myself been off grid by myself and the dog? You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
up
Yeah.
shed hunting in the mountains somewhere, or, guys are off deer hunting in northern Wisconsin or northern Maine, or, there's a million places that we put ourselves so vulnerable to this type of situation, and we don't even know it, like it could have been any of us or any
And you don't
outdoorsman.
expect that in those, right? The reason we go to those places are to get away from all this kind of stuff that's going on in the world. That I always tell myself that I was born 40 years too late, right? And you guys, even you're younger than me, so of course Brad's a lot older than me, so but but we're realistically, we go to these places to try to get away from what's going on in the world a lot of times, and just try to clear our minds. And I had some health problems, and I was going to see it for myself to see if I could really still do it. And yeah, just it just was really unfortunate. The police officer wanted to call my wife to verify my story and everything. So I ended up calling my wife, even though I don't know if you called Sandy right off, Brad. I don't know if you did or not, but I called Janet and just said, are you driving? She's, where are you? She says, yeah, I'm driving. I just left, Jan's house. I'm like, well, you got to pull over. What's the matter? What's the matter? And I'm like, well, me and Brad just had a little bit of an episode with this drifter that killed someone. And she's like, "You're coming home, right?" I'm like, "Well, no, the chances of it happening again aren't too good. I mean, we already got through the first one. So, but yeah, we try to go to these places to get away from it, and it's unfortunate that in this case it kind of followed us out there. But you're right. I'm glad that we made a few decisions that made all the difference.
Well, and to your point, Michael, when people are out there doing this stuff, that's not the first thing on your mind that these kind of things can happen. But we all know that it's a possibility. Now, my wife being retired, we take a camper and we'll go to different states and everything. It's one thing to be out in the field and you're hunting, you can run into things. But you think about now my wife being back at the camp, things can happen there too. You have to be aware for everything, no matter if it's her or if it's me. You have to be prepared for things like this. And if you're not, you become an instant victim.
And the funny thing is, like, you think about it all the time with, like, people, criminals or whatever, or, us as, survivalists and woodsmen, we say, like, if the world's going to end, we're going to go to X spot, in the middle of nowhere because we can survive. Well, those places now, the criminals or the bad people are thinking the same thing. I'm not going to be seen. I'm not going to be, within service, or they're going to have a tough time finding me. So we're actually going to the same place for different reasons, right? So we're putting ourselves vulnerable and not even know it, because you're in those situations. I mean, like when we go to northern Maine, like, and just like, Weed, New Mexico, like, it's a small town place. Everybody knows everybody. They know when, there's non-residents there and where they are and what they're doing, and you don't realize it, but they know what's going on there. So they see this kind of stuff, and like it's just it's crazy that something like that actually can actually happen to us while we're there, like we're in the middle of nowhere and you think it's a
Part
safety
of it
zone.
is it's really kind of a shame too, because when Janet and I were recently, we were in a shopping plaza here, and a guy came out between two cars and tried to flag us down. And um, I love my wife, but she's more of a city person, and very very cautious. And she's like, just go, speed up, speed up, speed up. And I'm like, well, maybe the guy needs something. And you kind of lose your faith in mankind. I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I don't want to stop and help this guy. And I rolled my window down a little bit. And he's like, hey, listen, there's an older couple over here. They're sitting in a hot car, and the guy doesn't look too good. You have a pickup truck? I thought maybe you'd have some jumper cables. And I'm thinking, well, is this a scam? Are they going to try to steal my truck? Or, and I looked over, and sure enough, there's an older couple, and they're sitting in the car, and so I did get out and help them. But I did have that for a second, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I shouldn't help them. And the same thing with that guy, if he would have just taken a gas can and went, I would have been fine with it. Just like, no, you can have the gas can, take the gas
Hmm.
can. But he certainly was, you know, very manipulative, and these criminals, they prey on people, the psychology of people. But it is a shame. It's just a real shame that that's what this has come to. Now you're worried about helping someone because you're afraid they're going to harm you.
Well, and you guys will know this in, earlier years, right? Like, people would thumb their way across the country and we would
Yeah.
pick people up, and I remember as a kid, like, being 16 years old and driving to high school, and guys would be walking down the side of the road. You see them when you're driving home, and you're like, yeah, jump in the back of the pickup truck. I'll drive you across town. I'm from a small town, and it was just a normal thing. Or you see people pulled over on the side of the road. I don't know how many times as a younger lad I would, roll down the window like, hey, you guys okay? Like, is everything all right when a car is broken down? But, like, those days have slowly diminished, and it's not all that long ago that has diminished, where, like, you cannot trust anybody because you think that something bad is going to happen because
Mm.
of these things that do happen.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So
Um,
they ended up catching him, or
yeah, they caught him. I think they caught him the next day. He stole like a side by side from neighbor's ranch,
hmm.
and they caught him, driving down the road in the side by side. I think it wasn't. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's what the
Yeah.
way it played out. I don't know where they actually found him in relation to our camp,
And there's
but they
only
did.
one road there. I don't know where he thought he was going to go, but it was crawling with police.
And
Yeah.
he didn't hurt anybody else or anything in the meantime, in that day's time of at large.
No, I think they had said that they were looking for the murder weapon, and I don't know if he left that in his truck or what, but I do know that they, like I said, they had dogs there, they had the helicopter. Interestingly enough, we stopped and saw an old friend of mine, the guy I used to outfit for. Um, he was about oh geez, he was probably 80 miles away maybe, and he said he had an alert on his phone that they were looking for this guy, and the schools were locked down, and it was kind of a big deal out there, you know. He said, I've never seen anything like this, but keep your eyes out, Michael. I've got this alert on my phone about this guy that killed someone at the weed gas station. And I ended up calling. Me and Brad called him a day later and said, yeah, geez, we know all about it. We gave him a ride and helped to get gas in his truck. But
And
I'm on a national fishing vessels commercial fishing safety board, and we had someone there from the government from NIASH, which is like National Industrial and Occupational Health and Safety or something, and she had all kinds of statistics. And commercial fishing is one of the most dangerous. It's the most dangerous occupation in the country right now. And you know what the second most dangerous occupation in the country is right now? Convenience store worker.
really,
Think about that for a second. You know, this poor girl, first day on the job, what's she making? Like, you know, $10 an hour. You know, I mean, and here this guy's trying to steal some gas and shoots her. I mean, it's like I said, it just really that part of it really just yeah, just horrible, just very tragic,
she lost her
very
life
tragic.
over $20
Yeah,
and was
whatever it
innocent.
was. Yeah,
This is
yeah.
crazy. Oh,
They
God
did
bless
have
her.
some surveillance footage, but I don't know if they, you know, how good of a picture they got of them. And then I think someone across the street maybe saw something. I don't really know all the details. And after it happened, I haven't looked any of it up, but you can look up shooting in Wheat, New Hampshire, and probably find something on the internet about it. But
New
We,
Mexico.
yeah, New Mexico.
oh yeah, New Mexico, yeah, New Mexico. Sorry about that.
So how did the hunting trip turn out? Because there was success there, and I bet you that, and, and you know, the emotional aspect of it is that after this probably happened, there was a whole different mindset in camp. Camp was probably not the same than when it began for you guys.
Yeah, I would say that that was true. Although we scouted real hard and we hunted real hard. I think that going in, I had some very high expectations. There's some really killer bulls in that unit, and I had some very high expectations that that's what I was set my sights on, and I wasn't going home with anything less than that. But after that whole thing happened, um, I had a very different perspective. Now I had a tag. Didn't have a tag. So I had a friend of mine also that showed up a couple days later that's from New Mexico, and he actually showed up the day before the hunt. So Brad and I took 4 days and really scoured that entire area. It found some really great areas. We found some mule deer. You know, just realized where we wanted to be and where we didn't want to be, and finally decided that you know it's like fishing, Trevor. You know, you don't lead fish to find fish.
Mm-hmm.
We had elk right in our backyard, and that's where we ultimately decided to chase them. So it's only a 5 day season, and this year muzzle loaders were primitive, so there were no modern muzzle loaders. There's uh, no scopes on them, and I don't think you can use like the rifle conversion. I'm not completely sure about all the regulations. I know the scopes for sure, and then there was something about, you know, like I used just a break action with a you know, primer, just a regular muzzle loader, and so Lance and myself spent the first 3 days trekking up and down the mountains, and I had a heart procedure in September, so I knew that I was going to be a little bit slower and probably not in as good a shape as I would have liked to have been in. But I also knew that ultimately I didn't want that to be the deciding factor on my hunt, that I was going to, you know, this was either going to be the best hunt I ever went on, or it was going to be the worst and maybe last hunt I ever went on. You know, if I had a heart attack up on that mountain, then God would bless me with being in a beautiful surrounding, and that would have been it, right? And you know, Brad knew all this, and again, I'm very thankful that he was able to be there. Now, the first couple days, Brad would basically spot for us. He would be up on a high piece where it was nice and warm, and then we'd be out there in the cold on the mountains. Of course, that isn't necessarily true either because he was up in the freezing cold wind and probably grossly unprepared. um, but we had some close calls. You know, we had elk at 50 yards, we had elk at 120 a bull. I just couldn't get a shot at it. And again, with open sights, it's a little bit different than putting a bead on it, you know, scope. Um, we had a herd come by relatively close, and usually the bulls are the last ones. Well, for whatever reason, in this group of elk that came by us, the bull was the first one. So I'm locked up waiting for the end of the last one, and there's no bull at the end. It was cows, and then I looked down the canyon, and the bull's the first one. So it just was one of those things where things just didn't line up. And Brad had seen a really really nice bull um, that was very close to camp, and we decided, all right, we're going to go up and check this out. So Lance and I went up behind the camp, and we couldn't find any bit of sign at all. This was just a bull that probably got bumped out from somewhere and was watering down the pasture, and then had moved on to somewhere else. And this is late in the day on the third day. So there's only 2 more days left. And already the bugling is starting to, it wasn't quite as strong in the morning. We only heard one bugle. We heard 4 shots out of the same area. We're hunting public land. Heard 4 shots in the same area that we were in, very close to us. So I told Brad that we hadn't really, hunted. We hadn't been in the field together hunting. And I said to him, I said, we just got to go a little old school on this. There was a water hole, excuse me, there was a dirt tank in the crotch of this canyon. And I told Brad, let's just go sit up there. It's just the wind's going to drop out. Let's just go sit up there. And it ended up being one of those really magical nights where we're walking in on a cattle trail. Excuse me, we're walking in on this cattle trail, so we could walk very quietly through the pasture and into the woods. And the woods were much more open than I thought they would be. I thought that there'd be more pinyon and um, there'd be more lower brush, but it was a lot more open than I thought it would be overall in that unit. So we get up to the water hole, and we found a couple of junipers, and we weren't really camouflaged that well, but we're just sitting on the edge of this dirt tank, and um, we watched the remember the turkeys that came down, Brad?
Yeah, 19 of them.
Yeah, a bunch of Miriam turkeys, and the toms are watering, and just really cool to see. And as the shadows grew, you know how it just kind of all of a sudden the noise of the wind and everything just goes, and you just hear like that hum of the summer bugs, the hum, and the air is still and kind of gets a little heavy and stuff. And I look to my left. Now Brad's on my left. I'm sitting on Brad's right. My muzzleloader is on the ground, and we've got this little Charlie Brown Christmas tree in front of us, a little juniper, like I said. I look to my left, and like, Brad, there's a bull. He's like, what? I'm like, don't move. There's a bull. And this guy was trotting. He was trotting right up to the water, and there was a big berm that came up to the top of that water tank. So once he was underneath that berm, I'm able to grab my muzzle loader and put it across my legs, and this bull just came up on this berm, and he wasn't but 15 yards away.
Yeah, too close.
He wasn't the biggest bull on the mountain. We probably heard him that morning trying to steal a couple cows. Um, he definitely was on the smaller side of the bulls that we saw in that unit. We saw some real corker bulls. This is a nice, respectable bull. After all we've been through, here God's given us this bull on flat ground. This thing was served up on a silver platter, and I did my best to screw it up by shooting a little bit low, and I end up running up the the hill, and shooting him again, reload and shot him again, and dropped him right there. Um, but yeah, it was I think that both of us were, we were hugging up there like high school prom date. You know what I mean? we were very excited that we could actually, you know, close it out and be successful. It was a 5x5. It was pretty much flat ground. Once we got it, down, we quartered it up there and got it all hanging in the trees that night. Then the next day, the three of us packed it out, and it was, as far as elk hunting goes, you're not going to get an easier pack out than that. As soon as we got down off the hill, it was all flat, like packed cattle trails till we got to the truck, and it wasn't very far, 3/4 of a mile maybe. Um, as far as an elk pack out, I mean, I've guided elk before. This was an absolute dream. So there were just a lot of positives. I'm so glad that we started the hunt together and we ended the hunt together. That's probably one of the thing I'm most thankful for.
That's amazing for it all to come together, though, and just go a little old school and enjoy it. Bring a little East Coast to the West Coast and sit over a watering hole and just kind of take it all in. I mean, that's kind of really what it's all about, honestly.
Yeah, it was just one of those nights when everything was, like I said, we walked in. I think we saw 6 or 8 mule deer when we were walking in, right? Just everything was kind of on their feet, and I do like that was the last day of the good moon phase. I'm a big fan of the moon phase and the dark of the moon and the hunter's moon. So that was the last day of the, more active, supposedly more active days. But more times than not, that seems to be, that does correlate to where I've had success before. And we didn't call it all. We just, now there were other bulls in the area up on the top of the hill as we're gutting this thing. There was another bull that kept bugling into the night. So maybe if we had waited, or maybe we charged up that hill after it or something, maybe we would have got into something else. But I got to say that this was probably one of the most satisfying animals that I've ever harvested in my life. And I've got some nice animals, but this one was very, very satisfying. It just goes to show you, like, we get caught up, all of us get caught up in inches of horn and you know scoring and what's on our trail cams, that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of good. But like I said, God served this up to us, and I just was, you know, very, very thankful that that's the way the hunt turned out. Of course, it's always a little bittersweet when it ends. That means you're going back home again. But yeah, it real in my mind, very successful, very satisfying. Yeah, the only thing I would have changed is maybe that girl would have lived at the convenience store, but some of that stuff's out of our hands.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a hunt to remember for sure. And I'm glad you guys were able to come home safe and had a successful hunt. It sounds like there was a lot of stuff going on. The mental roller coaster I could only imagine that you were enduring, and the lack of sleep while driving and scouting and all of these things that we go through as outdoorsmen. I could only imagine having to deal with such a thing while you're there. I couldn't even imagine. I really couldn't. I don't think anybody can, but we can learn from it.
Yeah, for
One thing
sure.
I did want to add in there, and part of what we're talking about here is situational awareness, whether it be with this joker that pulled all this stuff, or Michael talking about his hunt there by the pond. What he didn't mention, and it's very important to note, is the situational awareness. We were sitting there, and he's talking about how nice and calm it was, and the sounds and the smells and everything. But we had cattle around us on this pond, and they were kind of moseying and they were going on their way. And then all of a sudden, they all focused their way, all their attention down the draw from where we walked in on. And Michael said, "There's something coming up that draw." He picked up on that immediately. He said, "They see something. We can't see it right now." He said, "There's something coming," and wasn't too much longer, that's when Michael says, "There's a bull right there. Don't move." Of course, I got a camera. I wanted to film the whole thing, and now I can't even grab it. But the rest is history with the bull that he shot.
And honestly, Brad, you bring up a good point. Us as woodsmen and stuff, the situational awareness is a huge thing that we deal with every day in the outdoors, or trying to, and we become survivalist, and we start to pay attention to little things, broken twigs and all of this stuff while we're in the woods. And it's crazy that all those years of training that we've had since little kids to learn all of these things as woodsmen would then in turn be used in reality while you're out there. Where, like, for you guys, in my opinion, like when hearing the story and stuff, like, you guys were in a situation that was a little bit different. Like, you guys deal with this stuff on a daily basis as woodsmen, but your situational awareness, when brought into the situation that you were in, you started to think all of those things as a survivalist. And those are things that, like, you don't realize, but you're in training for those things your entire life, right? Like, it's crazy.
More importantly, Trevor, you don't have to think about them after a while, right? It's like any muscle memory or whatever, repetitive thing. You, as much as we'd like to think we're a civilized race now, there's still instinct. And I guarantee that all four of you guys, the three, four of us on this video right now, or this thing, have had instances where, you felt like something is watching you. Or, I've been to Africa where the Bushmen, they won't point at an animal. They'll open the palm of their hand because it's more welcoming. If they point, it's an aggressive, so they don't point at animals. They open the palm of their hand towards an animal. And all these things that there's some truth to those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in a stand and you're so focused on a deer and you start getting a little hopped up over it, next thing you know, that deer whips his head around and he stares right at you. Like he knows there's something there. And you can call it whatever you want, instinct, sixth sense, whatever it is. But there's something there that there's something to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your energy alone. I mean, that plays a big thing. And one of the things they say too with, like, whitetails or any type of animal is not to look them right in the eyes or stare at them, right? Because then they start to feel that sixth sense, and those are things that us as, like, just survivalists, and as you said, like, instinctual, those things that we pay attention to. But the moral of the story here is just situational awareness, and we have to pay attention when we're in these places, because we're not only there for good, but we're also vulnerable to harm and bad things in travel. Like, I feel as if there's more stories like this that are out there but not shared. And I think, I can't thank you guys enough for sharing this with us and the listeners, so that they can kind of understand how this works, and to be a little bit, more aware of what's going on while they're out there, so that they're not vulnerable to a situation like this.
A lot of us prepare for these trips. You have first aid kits, you have in reach or whatever you need to get yourself out of a bad spot. But I've never been a huge proponent of carrying, although I've thought about it a lot more. Uh, Carrying a weapon on a regular, it's just it just it's something that all of us have to justify in our own minds, and but it's just one more thing that all of us should be aware of, just as we have our in reach and everything else that tries to keep us safe when we're in places off the grid.
Like we say, you can't put your seatbelt on after the accident. You have to always wear your seatbelt. So always be prepared for any type of situation that could be thrown at you. Like, just the way that it goes. Well, guys, I have one last question before we let this thing go, and I can only imagine the answer to this, but I want to ask you guys, what drives you guys outdoors?
Go ahead, Mike.
No, you got. I've talked. He's got enough of me.
For me, it's and why I choose bow hunting too. The challenge kind of restrict yourself to, for me, the short range weapon. You're out there one-on-one with the animals, or in a case where, you got deer all around you, the challenge of going out there. And I used to be a trapper. I trapped all through high school and so forth. And the challenges in trapping, and learning the animals and trying to, so to speak, get in their head. What do they do? What are their habits? It's so fascinating. And then when I segued into whitetail hunting mostly, and a little bit into pronghorn and so forth out west, um, the chess game, as you all know, to get whooped and to tip your hat to the animals and say, you won this one, good on you, but I'll get you next time. That is what drives me. My wife will say something to the effect, well, you've already done that, or what keeps motivating you, what keeps driving you? But every situation is different. Every deer uh, has its own unique characteristics. So if every single one is a challenge, and that's what drives me. Just playing this chess game and getting out there uh, is fascinating to me. I can't get enough of it. I just can't.
How about you, Mike? I gotta hear
I
it.
actually, I have a little bit of different. I do enjoy the challenge. Obviously, as soon as you pull the trigger, the hunt's over, and I always find that kind of depressing, right? I mean, the the challenge is getting into their bedrooms or into their learning their habits and outsmarting to the point where you could harvest them. As soon as you pull the trigger, then the hunt's over, and that's kind of that's kind of the to me that's always been kind of the downside of it. Um, but I do like meeting people in other places. I like traveling, and a lot of times the hunting is kind of a segue to that to being somewhere else. But it's also a personal challenge. Not just physically but mentally. Putting yourself in a spot where you have elevation or terrain you're not used to, or um, and then again learning just the habits of the animal. I do find do-it-yourself hunts are extremely fulfilling, and I like the idea of accepting that challenge. And Brad says, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some, and you got to be prepared to tip your hat to those animals. And I mean, they're fighting for their lives. Um, I'm left eye dominant and right handed, so I've never been quite the bow hunter that Brad was, just because of my limited range. And I do enjoy it, but I also enjoy muzzleloader and rifle, and I just like being out in the great outdoors. I mean, we've got a wonderful wonderful opportunity in the United States that there's so much public land. And yeah, some of it is oversubscribed, especially in places where there's a large population of hunters. But that land belongs to all of us. And like I said, we did this public land elk hunt, and we're able to be successful, and very thankful for that.
Absolutely. I absolutely love it. And guys, I can't thank you guys enough for sharing this message with everybody, and your love and passion for the outdoors, and taking the time to join us and kind of share with our listenership. We really appreciate it, guys, and we can't thank you guys enough, honestly. And it means a lot. And hopefully this will save somebody in the near future. And if they're ever in that situation, not that we hope that, but if they are, hopefully this will be in the back of their minds, and persuade somebody to do something a little bit different. So we can't
Yeah,
thank you
for
guys
sure.
enough for that, honestly.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you. It's been our pleasure.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, thanks for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.